I'm Elaine Hagan, and I was pretty instrumental in helping with Bob Durlett's campaign. Twice since 2016, I've been wrong. I've been asked to kind of give an introduction to the candidates. We have at least 4 female candidates that are running against McClintock. Sharon, yes. Sharon Maravich, who's chair of the Central Committee, said she already has a favorite candidate. It's A.B. McC. Anybody but McClintock. So, 2 of the candidates are here this evening and have given several other events today. I've asked them to just assume that you have not heard their presentation before today, and they're just going to start as if you have not. So if you've already heard it, just, plan your grocery list for a minute. On the 21st, Rosa Calderon, who is also running for Congress, will be here, 6 o'clock, this room. And that's being co-sponsored by Tuolumne County Indivisible. John Garcia helped us with this event. Also, we're trying to reach every potential voter that we possibly can. We flipped a coin, and Regina Bateson won the coin toss, so she's going to talk first. So we're going to have Regina talk for 15 minutes, just kind of give her standard stump speech. And then Jessica Morse will give her campaign plug. And then we're going to bring them both up, and the audience can ask questions, and you can direct it towards one candidate, towards the other, towards both, or just make an observation. Do we want to have a mic around in the audience, or just bellow the questions again?
We can repeat the question.
Okay, so if you have a question that you're shouting from the back of the room, if we can repeat it up in the front of the room so that we can hear it again, that would be awesome. Okay. Regina Bateson, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elaine. Thank you to everyone else who put this visit together today. It's things like this that make me really hopeful, because I don't know about you, but after the 2016 election, I went through a long period of depression and angst and worry and paralysis and just feeling disempowered and hopeless and miserable. And, it took some time, right? I cast about. I gave my little bits of money here and there to different organizations. But I thought there is something more that I can do, and this is a time in history when every single one of us needs to stand up and do the most that we can do to fix what is wrong in our district and in our country. And so I eventually took a long, hard look around, and I thought, what is the highest impact thing that I can do that's really important? And I said, I'm going to do something about Tom McClintock, because there is absolutely no reason why that man should be representing this district. Thank you. So I'll be honest with you. My first idea about this race was inspired by Stephen Colbert. I actually thought Stephen Colbert can form a super PAC. I can do that. This is a time when normal people can get involved in politics in a way that was never possible before, largely because of the internet. So my committee even was going to have a name. It was going to be the Committee to Defeat Tom McClintock. I thought that was direct, had a nice ring to it, and I said, I'm going to raise money and try to help someone run to beat him, or run straight opposition against him in the 2018 election. But then I went on this deep dive, because I still couldn't understand, how is it that a man who is from Southern California, who has absolutely no connection to this district, who promised in 2008 to move here and never did it, who consistently votes against the interests and values of this district, how is it that he's winning 60% of the vote over and over and over again here? So I went on this deep dive of all the prior Democratic campaigns from recent memory and discovered there were some real obstacles that were making it hard for people to run a competitive campaign here, no matter how hard they tried. So the first problem that jumped out at me was starting too late, right? That you really need to be starting early in 2017, in this case, to run a serious campaign. The second issue is fundraising. And the third issue is having professional staff and a professional approach that can cover a district that's this large. And if you do those 3 things, you're not guaranteed to win, but if you don't do them, you're guaranteed to lose, basically. And so I got really concerned earlier this year, in January, in February, even in March, because there was a tremendous movement here that you all are part of, and there are extraordinary things happening in this district, but there wasn't a campaign starting in a real and serious way at that time. And so I said, maybe I should try to find a candidate. And I actually went around, I tried recruiting people. People in education is who I thought of actually, a school superintendent, former teachers, and people didn't want to do it, right? Because this is hard. I think we can both agree. It's 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. It will wildly disrupt your life. And people think politics is a sort of a nasty and difficult field to enter. So people told me no, that they didn't want to run. And then one of my former teachers came up with the idea that I should actually run as a candidate. And I said no, of course, because I'm a rational person. And because I loved the job that I had and that I've now taken a leave of absence from. I have 3 young children. I mean, it's a real sacrifice and something that's really disrupted the normal course of my life. So I said, no, I'm not going to do that. But then I went to Tom McClintock's town hall meeting on April 8th at Deloro High School in Loomis. Now, it's pretty far for you guys. Were any of you there? Or has anyone seen the video? Well, you were, of course. So maybe a few people have seen the video. But you've seen him in action in other settings. It was just so upsetting to me. I mean, I knew all the facts. I knew all the terrible votes. That he's voted against the Violence Against Women Act. Even the Republican authored renewal of it. He consistently votes against common sense fire prevention measures, even when they have bipartisan support. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? I knew all those things. But seeing the way he treats people, I just thought, this can't stand. Someone needs to do something. So I went home and made a website the very same day, and it hit the internet very quickly and became very popular quickly. And then I was a prospective candidate for a while and went around meeting as many groups as possible. And I really apologize that it's taken this long for some of us to meet each other, but we're doing the best we can with a big geographic area. And that went well. So then I became an official candidate with the FEC on April 29th, and we're off and running. At this point, we have 70 volunteers throughout the district. We've raised quite a bit of money in the first quarter, and the FEC reports for that will come out this coming weekend. And I feel actually really hopeful that we're putting the pieces in place that we need to actually beat Tom McClintock in 2018. So I'd like to tell you a bit more about my own background, though, because it's important not just to run a good campaign, but also to be someone who you all can trust and hopefully get to know, and someone who understands the region and the needs here. So again, for anyone who's coming in late, my name is Regina Bateson, and I'm from Roseville, so the far northern part of our district. And my parents brought our family there when I was 2 years old. They're actually from Minnesota, and they've been living in Hawaii for a while, and they found it a little difficult to raise kids there. So they brought us to Roseville because they thought it would be a great place to raise a family, which it is. And I went to the public schools there, and I'm a proud graduate of those public schools. I worked a lot of part-time jobs. If you drove through Roseville in the late 1990s, there's a good chance that I might have served you your food or sold you some clothes or things like that. I did ice cream scooping, sandwich making. I was a softball umpire for a while. And then I went off to college. And I went to Stanford and got a bachelor's degree in history. And I also spent some time in Latin America, both in high school and in college, so I speak Spanish fluently. And when I graduated from college, that was shortly after 9/11, and I joined the Foreign Service. Now, the Foreign Service is the diplomatic branch of the State Department. And so I went to Washington, D.C., and I studied terrorist travel and border security. And then I was sent abroad to go work at the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala City. So I did visa work there, issuing and denying visas, and I also did American Citizen Services, which is helping Americans who have serious emergencies while they're abroad. And after doing that for a while, I decided to go back to school, and so I went and got actually a PhD in political science, and I had a National Science Foundation fellowship while I was doing that. And that's actually where Tom McClintock starts to re-enter the story. I mean, I had always been insulted and offended by him and his representation of this area. But around 2012, he actually was spearheading an effort to kill the very fellowship that I had that was funding my ability to go to graduate school. So I launched a little media campaign against him then and succeeded in getting some articles into the local papers about how he was taking scholarships away from deserving young people from the region. But then he got reelected anyhow, of course. That was my one little barb that I threw at him in the past. And as we said, after the 2016 election, I decided we had to take some action. And so here we are today. Now, the themes of my campaign are jobs in the economy, healthcare, and protecting the environment. And the reason I'm focusing on those things is because I feel like this campaign shouldn't really be about sort of me as a person and my own kind of personal preferences and pet issues. I mean, what's really important are focusing on the tangible, practical issues that affect people's lives here in the district. And I think that's how we're going to both excite our own base and reach out to people quite broadly, because we need their support. So I wanted to say a little bit about each of those three areas. I'd actually like to start with the environment and the great outdoors. Now, I firmly believe that the reason a lot of us live here is because we love the great outdoors. And that's something that cuts across party lines. It doesn't matter what party you belong to. Some people consider themselves environmentalists. Other people just like hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, skiing, cycling, you name it. We all enjoy the ability to go outdoors, and we all value the environment that we're in here. In fact, so I have a couple questions for you, actually. So I'd like to know how many of you believe that climate change is real? Okay, good. That's about what I thought. I like to hear that. But now I'm wondering, what percentage of people here in this congressional district agree with you, do you think? So if we did a survey, what's that?
Just this room.
Well, okay, so only this room, that's a pretty small percentage. But what if we did a survey of the whole district, from Roseville all the way over to Lake Tahoe, down past Yosemite, down to Kings Canyon National Park. What percent of adults do you think believe that climate change is real? I mean, let's get some guesses. Okay, so I heard 60, I heard 70.
I say 30.
30.
75%.
75? 80. Okay, so you guys have a range of views here. So I'll say that most commonly with groups, the 30% guess is pretty common. The answer is actually 69%. So those of you who guessed 60, 70, 75, this is an issue where, come on. We have a district that includes Yosemite National Park, Lake Tahoe, other beautiful country here, a tremendous amount of national forest, and we're being represented by someone who arguably has the worst environmental record in Congress. This is crazy. He's one of the most extreme climate change deniers in Congress, and we don't even have to convince people to change their views. People already actually agree with us that this is important. It's not just they think climate change is happening. In the same survey, 68% of people in this district think climate change is a serious threat to future generations. 81% of people in this district already support federal funding for research into renewable energy. And who's voted against over $1 billion of funding for research into renewable energy? Tom McClintock. So these are areas where we can reach out to people, and we just need to show how these are actually shared values. And I think people understand also this sort of transitions into the economy, right? Because the environment and the great outdoors are so important for the economy here. Now, I'm guessing that a lot of you may have seen Tom McClintock's tweet after Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords. But to refresh your memory, he literally praised Trump and thanked him for having stood up for America's working families and for prosperity. The obvious question I had to ask myself was, what about your own district? What about working families and small businesses in your own district? Because there's such a close link between the environment and the economy here. Depending on the county, tourism is one of the top industries in most of our counties. Tourism obviously is closely connected to the natural environment. That's why we get our 15 million visitors a year. Small businesses depend on the environment, responsible management of the environment. When Yosemite National Park was shut down, for example, that killed some small businesses in the Mariposa area. So this is absolutely an economic issue for us here. I think our economy depends on having someone who will fight for the environment, but also important programs that we need here. We need better internet access throughout our district, and that is a responsibility of the federal government to be helping to make that happen so we can attract businesses here so people can do the job training they may want to be doing to advance their careers. We really need to invest in our community colleges and in vocational and technical education. My mom teaches in the nursing program at Sierra College, which is our community college up in the Roseville and Rockland and Placer County area. And I can tell you that programs like that are typically more affordable for students. They're training people in the skills that we need in the industries where there's actually employment opportunities. And her program has a waiting list to get in, and then employers snap up the graduates before they've even finished. I think that's the model of the types of programs that we need to be promoting. And we actually did go over to Columbia College today, and it was really great to talk to some of the students there, and to learn about the Promise Scholarship, that I honestly wasn't aware of before this, but this is tremendous. It's the exact kind of program we need to be sort of supporting and promoting and expanding to give people access to community college, which is going to be free for them in this area if they've graduated from high school in this area starting in 2018. That's amazing. So those are some of the investments that I think we need to make in our economy here to allow people, give them the tools they need to be able to start small businesses if they want to be able to advance. I'm really committed to working with people in our district by recognizing their values and, showing how we share those values. So, for example, a lot of people here feel like they want to see people working hard and pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and being independent. To which I say fine, but we need to give people the tools to do that. The opportunities, education, access to important infrastructure like the internet, like broadband, and that's something that they're not getting right now. McClintock has voted twice against federal support for expansions of rural broadband, for example. The last area I want to talk about is healthcare, because I absolutely believe that access to affordable healthcare is both a right and a necessity. And again, people use the language of independence and freedom, and we can approach them and say, sure, we share those values, but how are you free if you're in so much pain that you can't work, even if you wanted to? If someone has arthritis that's destroyed their hands and their mobility, how can that person go out and work? If people value family values, how can you spend time with your children and with your grandchildren if you can't access the health care that you need? And so I'm absolutely committed to fighting for the Affordable Care Act and to protecting and improving it. It is critical for our district. It cut the uninsurance rate in half in just 2 years here. It's providing everyone else with a higher quality of health care, whether you have employer-sponsored insurance or even Medicare, where it's reducing prescription drug prices for our seniors. So that is absolutely critical. And when McClintock voted for the AHCA to repeal the Affordable Care Act, he only mentioned one place when he justified his vote, and that was Iowa. He literally said, this is on his website, I encourage you to go look, he literally said he was voting for the AHCA to repeal the Affordable Care Act because allegedly Obamacare has failed in Iowa. The question being, what about your own district? Why would you do something that so directly harms your own district? So that is the question that I'd like to leave you with tonight. Why do we have a representative who votes against our interests and our values? It's because people haven't had a real alternative in years and years and years. And we're starting early, we're organized, and I think I can be that alternative for you. So I look forward to talking to you more as the night goes on. Thank you.
All right, who's ready to fire Tom McClintock? So I'm Jessica Morse. I am a fifth-generation Northern Californian. I would like to point out that many of you noticed I'm wearing sleeveless today. It's a little shout out to Paul Ryan. So I'm a fifth-generation Northern Californian. My great-great-grandparents came over on covered wagons and landed in the Sierra foothills on the northern end up near Auburn area. And we still have that land that they pioneered in our family, and it still supports our family. And my cousins live up there still and do selective logging, and they build houses with the logs that they mill on site. We even still have a gold mine in the family that my great-great-grandfather won in a poker bet. The Boy Scouts mine it, and they're cleaning us out. But I grew up a little further down the hill in Carmichael, and I grew up with a deep commitment to public service. My mother took my sister and I out on weekends, volunteering with our church and volunteering at a local nursing home, cleaning up the river, cleaning up trails. And I learned really early on that a service-driven life is a purpose-filled life. And I was completely addicted to that feeling of being able to give back and see an impact from my work. To my mother's dismay, I took that commitment to service and I went overseas. I started out in Ethiopia with Save the Children. And when I first got out there, they sent me out on famine relief work out to villages to help find people who were on the brink of starvation and bring them back to feeding centers. And as I was loading a woman and her 5-year-old daughter into the car, I realized that they had been eating grass. And I was startled to drive back through the countryside and look at all of the fields And even though I had been going from village to village where people were on the brink of starvation, I noticed that all the fields were green. And that's when I realized it had rained, but just at the wrong time to water the crops. And I recognized that famine isn't a natural disaster. It's a political disaster. And if it's a political disaster, that means that I could find a policy solution. And so I committed myself to understanding the causes of issues that plague humanity. Not just understanding the superficiality of what I was seeing or moaning about the tragedy of it, but really understanding what was the underlying cause that had allowed this problem to persist and how do we fix it. I joined the U.S. Agency for International Development. It is the U.S.'s foreign aid agency, and they work directly on trying to solve the root causes of human disaster, whether it is giving microloans to people who can't access money so that they can be entrepreneurs, whether it is retrofitting water infrastructure so that people can have access to irrigation or crops, coming in emergencies. And so when I joined USAID, they took one look at me in around 2005 and they said, "We're sending you to Baghdad." And I said, okay. And I told my mother, "This is for your own spiritual growth." And off I went to Iraq. And I went out and I was in Iraq for about a year and a half at the height of the war. And I saw the rise of the insurgency. I stood side by side with our troops and I saw the sacrifices that they make and the tragedies that it causes to their families. You know, to be serving overseas, even if they come home in one piece, there is still a burden on everyone. The families are sacrificing having their wives and husbands gone. I was standing side by side with a colleague of mine as he was weeping over his computer, and I asked him what was wrong, and he said his wife is at home having their first child, and the internet connection just went down, and he can't Skype in anymore. And I stood side by side with my Iraqi colleagues too out there, and I saw what makes a refugee. I saw them go through hellish situations and circumstances and have their lives driven to the brink because they were out living in a war zone every single day. And I saw what it means for them to uproot their lives and flee for their lives. I had a young woman who was a friend of mine, Samar, and she was 26 years old, real go-getter, and she was excited, had this intellectual curiosity like me, and she told me one day that she was ready to marry this 60-year-old American man who had promised to take her away from the war zone and to get her family out. And I said, Samar, you cannot sell yourself. Because she and I were kindred spirits. You know, I thought, what mentality would I have to be in? What state would I have to be in where I would be willing to sell myself to save my family? And so I worked really hard with her and got her a Fulbright scholarship to the U.S., where she was then able to study, get her PhD, become a U.S. citizen, get married, and she now has 2 beautiful children and a husband about her same age. And Iraq was a really foundational experience for me. My main job was trying to restaff Iraq's government, and I had it was an easy way to put a jetpack on your career, unbeknownst to me, just being out there in the war zone. But I recognized something that when I came home on a break. I came home in the summer of 2006, and I was sitting in Roseville with my cousins, and these are cousins who watch 2 different cable news channels. And one was talking all about the war, the weapons of mass destruction, and who lied about it, and how dare they. And the other one was talking all about the newfound democracy that Iraqis had, and the Saddam Hussein trial, and aren't they loving this newfound freedom? No one was talking about what I was seeing on the ground. What I was living through every day in Iraq was the rise of an insurgency that would later morph into ISIS. And I knew that if we didn't if we didn't stifle that insurgency at the beginning, while it was still nascent, while we still had an opportunity to get all those young men and put them to work and into jobs, so they weren't vulnerable to recruitment by these different groups, and to keep the communities, satisfied with water and electricity, so that they weren't anxious and welcoming in other groups that were offering them, these insurgent groups that were offering them those same solutions. That if we didn't stop this insurgency, I knew it would morph and it would devastate the entire region, and it would come back and cost us money and American lives. And I had seen it. I had been jogging in neighborhoods that I had jogged in every day in Iraq, and one day I found myself surrounded by a dozen men with automatic weapons, and I was looking down the barrels of these AK-47s at this Iraqi militia closing in on me, and I was in a cul-de-sac, and I thought, okay, I can either run back and get cornered, and so I just sprinted straight at them, and it startled them so much that I was able to get through them before they closed in, and they didn't expect the short blonde girl to run at them, and so I was able to escape. But I was feeling the insurgency. I was seeing the change as it was happening every day. I was feeling the rockets were coming in every day into our compound. Initially, it was from 6 a.m. or at 6 p.m. every day, and then it started to be, on the hour every hour, and I felt the war heightening. And so as I was sitting in this golf course in between my cousins, I looked at them and I said, I realized they didn't see what was happening. And I said, trying to describe Iraq through a red lens or a blue lens is like trying to describe a rainbow using two colors. You can't see the whole picture. And if you can't see the problem, you can't solve the problem. And today, I feel like our political polarization is similar to that day back in Iraq, where we have real issues that need real solutions right here in our community, whether it's rural broadband or 100 million dead trees that are threatening fire or falling on your homes or costing $1,000 a tree to get out. Whether it is students that are trying to get a college education so they can join the economy and be competitive and reach their potential, but instead they're having to pay the equivalent of a home mortgage to be able to afford that education. Or if it is the 240,000 people, nearly 240,000 members of our community in our district who are on Medicaid right now, and their representative, who they clearly didn't elect, has voted against them, has voted to jeopardize their health for political gains. And these are real problems, and they shouldn't be political problems. I spent my career, you all have my bio in front of you there, but I spent my career going from USAID to the State Department working on federal budget, to the Defense Department working on strategy as a strategic advisor for the 4-star Admiral, trying to keep our world safer and more prosperous. Because I knew that when the world prospers, America prospers. It means our immigration pressures ease. It means that our goods are cheaper, so our standard of living is more affordable. And it means that our troops get to sleep at home. So I have been serving my country every day for my entire career for the last dozen years. And I am here to serve my community because this is the community I grew up in. Every time I've been going overseas, this has always been home base. And this is the community that I love. And I feel like the atrocities that I have been trying to fight overseas are home. And it is time for me to step up and take these tools that I've learned and apply them to our community. Because I grew up hiking and fishing and skiing all over these mountains. I've actually hiked the entire length of the district from top to bottom. I did a 500-mile trek on the Pacific Crest Trail by myself. And I love these mountains. I know what a gem we have here. I know how precious our community is. I know how amazing it is to go fly fishing on the San Joaquin and the Mokelumne and the American rivers. I know how gorgeous Yosemite is because I feel like I grew up there. My family and I have gone camping there for a week every year since I was 2 years old. I learned to ride my bike there. I learned to rock climb there. I was sitting and talking with the superintendent of Yosemite a couple weeks ago, and he was saying he prioritizes Yosemite as an educational tool, and I thought, I get that. Because I understood forest ecology because I was been hiking in those woods. I understood geology because I knew exactly what a glacier can do to granite. I understood that you shouldn't leave food out for bears because they will get into your car. And And I learned these things because this community has raised me, and I am terrified when we have a representative who says, for political gains, that he is going to dam the Merced River. He is going to dam the Tuolumne River and take away their wild and scenic designation. That he wants to commercialize Yosemite. I don't know if y'all remember the Fire Falls. We kind of learned those lessons. This is, and we learned, Hetch Hetchy is the memorial to what can happen if you build a dam in the wrong place, or at all. At this point, we don't have any spots left. And so it is critical that we stop this political polarization. I took an oath when I signed on with the State Department and the Defense Department. And I took an oath to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That is not an oath to defend a political party. It is not an oath to defend a personality or a president. Every member of our military, every member of our Congress, even the President of the United States has taken that oath. It is an oath to defend the very foundation of our democracy. And that is what I am doing here. I am here fighting for our community. And I am concerned that we have real challenges in this district that need real solutions. And I am tired of politicians like McClintock who move up from Southern California and try to send our water back down, trying to gain political points off of our lives and our livelihoods. And I am tired of political polarization because it is time for all of us to step up and recognize the real issues and the real struggles that we have in this community and have the compassion and the insight and the ingenuity to be able to solve them together. So I am here today to take a stand against partisanship. I am definitely a Democrat, but I am first and foremost a Californian. And I am here raising the standard and raising the bar. And I'm going to close with one story that epitomizes this. I went and gave a talk out in Mariposa. I've been traveling the district nonstop for the last 2 months, talking to county supervisors and mayors to really understand and giving talks in communities. And I went out to go give a talk in Mariposa, and a woman on the far right put up this Facebook post saying, "We're going to go get this Democrat, and we're going to block her, and we're going to stop her from coming out here." And she had guns all over her page, and she said it was going to be explosive, and I was a little nervous. And so I decided to try to, rather than fight her, I decided to bring fire and grace. And so I said to her, I wrote to her publicly, and I said, "Congratulations on your own campaign." She was running for governor. It takes a lot of courage for any woman to step up in our community and run for office. And I would be delighted for you to come to my talk and bring your community, because I'm going to be talking about my experience in Iraq and my deep roots in this community, and I'm going to be talking about the solutions we need as Californians, and you are welcome at that discussion, and I would love your input. And when I got to the talk, she was out in the parking lot, but she didn't have anyone else with her. And I smiled at her graciously, and it diffused the situation. So I am here today to defend our Constitution, which was born in compromise. I am here today to defend California and my community. And I don't care what's left or right anymore. I care about what's right and wrong. And I am here to take a stand for what is right, and I am glad that you're joining me today.
Anybody almost feel sorry for Tom McClintock? No. All right, let me just, Jessica, Regina, can you guys just stand for a second? How many of you have at least one dead tree on your property? How many of you have more than 5? More than 10?
I took them down already.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'm going to count. So if you have taken dead trees down on your property, so more than 1, more than 5, more than 10, more than 20. Okay. How many of you are on Medicare? Medicare. And supplements. How many of you are concerned about health care in this county? Okay. What else? Oh, community colleges. How many of us got degrees from community colleges? How many of us are teachers at community colleges? How many of us feel like we do not want Mr. McClintock to shut down Columbia? Who's ready to volunteer? Who's ready to help run a campaign? Who's ready to kick the McClintocks, out of this area? All right. So what I'm going to do is we will have, you can direct a question to one candidate, to either candidate, to both candidates. But if you would bellow the question loudly, that would be nice. Lori Sylvester. Lori has been a supervisor and may or may not run for supervisor.
It's possible, yeah.
Yes, so we're discussing it. We're bribing her. And she's a teacher at Columbia.
Yeah. Both of you are lifting our voices up, and this felt better than anything I've ever been through from you. Both of you deserve all of our energy, and you need to keep speaking. I beg you to keep speaking to the community. They need to hear what you have to say, both of you. I want to see both of you and see who else is running, but keep your voices up there and speak the words that we have not been able to hear. You're both amazing. Do each of you live in the district? Can you identify? I really wasn't certain from what you said.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So I moved with my family in 1984 to Roseville, and I lived there through the time I finished high school. And when I went to college, I was still a resident there, and to the best of my recollection was always still voting in Placer County, would come back in the summers and things like that. Same was true when I was in the Foreign Service. So this is probably true of Jessica also, but if you're abroad, you need to have a place of residence in the U.S. And so that was Roseville for me, and I was voting in Placer County through the very kind clerk of elections there, the county clerk. You can vote from abroad. But in 2006, when I went off to do my PhD, I did actually move, and I went to Yale, and so that was a tremendous opportunity, and that was why I switched to voting over there as a Democrat. And then when I finished my PhD, I got a job at MIT, and I had actually wanted to come back here, but my choices in the academic job market were Minnesota or MIT. And so we went to MIT and to Boston, and then that was where I had been until now. And so at this point, I've just decided this is really important, though, and I can't stand to see this man representing this area where I'm from, and it means a lot to me, and where all my relatives are. And so what I'm doing right now is in the process. It's a bit funny, right? So I'm about 70% of my time back here or more in the district, and August 1st is when my whole family is moving. I mean, they're physically here with me right now, so it's a bit back and forth right now, and I have 3 young children, so it's taken a little time to work out. But starting on August 1st, we'll be here, Roseville completely, and I've arranged to go on unpaid leave from MIT. So again, when I say this is caused me a little angst. I mean, those of you who are in the community college here probably know that if you go do something very significant, like run for Congress while you're on the tenure track, you're not going to get tenure. And that's something that I've accepted. I've decided this is so important that I need to come put my skills to use here. And even sent an email to 350 of my colleagues a while ago, essentially explaining what I was doing and trying to quell their fears that this is an informed decision that I've made. So at this point, I'm on unpaid leave from MIT indefinitely, and next year I'm going to be a visiting fellow at Stanford and teach one class there. It meets in the winter quarter, 1 day a week for 3 hours a week, and it's about Central America, which is my academic expertise. But besides that, I'll just be doing the campaign full-time, and we'll be completely here. I am completely committed to doing this, as I said, 18 hours a day, every day, with my kids along as much as possible so that I get to see them too.
Yeah, I'm living in Pollock Pines, just renting a small place there, and but my family property's up in Placer County, so I've been paying property taxes there for my entire life. Since my mother decided that it was time for me to pay the taxes, my dad's in Carmichael, which is outside of the district boundary, and so Carmichael had been kind of my home base while I've been traveling overseas. But most of my relatives are in either Roseville or El Dorado Hills or up in Tahoe, or we're scattered. We're a big family, and we're all throughout the area. So my official residence is Pollock Pines, but really, I mean, I've been on the road since I've started this. My campaign has just become official this week, And so I wanted to spend the first 3 months of my campaign touring the district and really talking to people and listening and ensuring that I really understood the nuance of each community in our district. Because I recognize that the needs in Roseville are different than the needs in Tahoe versus the needs here versus the needs down in Kings Canyon. You know, we have different needs in our community. And so I've hit all 10 counties now and have been talking to folks and meeting with local electeds and experts and the hospital boards and stuff to make sure that I understand really that I'm not just talking political talking points, that there's real depth behind it so that I can be an effective advocate for our community here. And I've quit my job to do this. So I am fully committed and in this full time, and so that's also why I've been so grateful that people have been opening up their homes, because somebody put it that I live in the district to the tune of the couches and spare bedrooms of my constituents. And so I have been so grateful for folks who have been hosting me as I have been traveling the district and getting to know every layer of our community.
Next.
I'm Donna Wilhelm, and I have so many ideas about the environment, but one thing I would like to see changed in Washington is the lobbyists, the big money that goes in there. And I know a lot of times it takes money to get your opinions, your ideas out there. But what different ideas can you take to Washington if you become our next congresswoman to stop this lobbying?
Yeah, I think the lobbying is a symptom of two things. It is a symptom of having too much money in campaigns, and so we need serious campaign finance reform. And I have been exploring all sorts of different ideas, whether it's from publicly funded campaigns we really need to try to figure out how to get past Citizens United, because I'm sorry, but a corporation shouldn't have free speech. So campaign finance reform is absolutely top priority. I mean, it's ironic because to beat McClintock, we are going to have to raise approximately $3 million to be able to oust him. But then I want to pass campaign finance reform so that we can spend our time as representatives representing our community rather than on the phone fundraising and trying to get people from the outside to help support us. And so it absolutely is flipped upside down and backwards, and we need to fix it. And so I am committed to doing that, and I'm committed to making that a top priority, because I think that will allow individual voices and the voices of representatives the voices in our community to be heard over the voices of corporations and people with big money. The other thing that will actually help stop lobbying is getting more staff in congressional offices. There's now such a high volume of bills coming through that when you hear a congressman say, "Oh, I didn't have time to read the health care bill," what they're really saying is, "My staff read it." And I mean, it's not a great response from any of them. Let's just be clear. But we need to be able to have them have the staff capacity to do the research. I was talking to a congressman a couple years ago who's a friend of mine, and he was saying, I was like, "Oh, how do why do you even let lobbyists into your office door?" And he said, "Well, it's because they've done the research. And it's because they know they have the detailed nuance of these bills, and my staff doesn't have the capacity to do that." And so we need to ensure that our congressional staff, our congressional representatives are staffed in a way that they can do the real due diligence themselves and don't have to rely on outside influences to do the research for them.
Thank you. So that's a terrific question. And actually, again, I want to ask you all a question. You can probably tell that I do teaching, and I really actually like interacting with groups. Okay, does anybody know who is Tom McClintock's top campaign contributor from the last cycle? Oh, you guys are so well informed. I love you. Coke Industries, right? $10,000 to Tom McClintock on his web, or you can see this on Open Secrets, right? If you go to Open Secrets, you look up Tom McClintock. It is literally true that he is a Coke-funded politician, and I think this explains so many of his stances on the environment. I mean, ExxonMobil is another one of his huge donors. Various other extractive industries give him a lot of money. So I think he illustrates the problem, you've put your finger on. I would agree with a lot of Jessica's thoughts about campaign finance reform, which is something we really need. But it's also true that the reality of the situation right now is that in a district where the incumbent has been winning by large margins, and where a lot of people think it is not possible to run a competitive Democratic congressional campaign, fundraising really matters. So it is something that I take seriously, but I'm also really committed to doing as much of that as possible through small donations, ideally online or even from house parties that we've been having here in the district. And so I'm really very proud to say that our first quarter fundraising report that's going to come out on the 15th is going to show that we've done very well and we're off to a strong start, but that's primarily from hundreds and hundreds of small donors here in the district. And I really think that should be the basis of campaigns, and that's where we're getting our start here. I mean, it's groups like you, the thousands and thousands of activists across the district. You're the ones propelling our campaign, mine in particular, and other Democratic candidates' campaigns forward. And so there's such a strong contrast, I think, between us and then, Koch-funded McClintock.
Terry was, when she said something about 10 counties. How many of you know how big the district is? 10 counties. How many knew until Bob Gillette started driving all those counties? There's roughly 757,000 people in the district. It's the size of the state of Massachusetts. So they have to drive from above Lake Tahoe all the way to Sequoia. It's a huge district, very split up district. Nan, you had a question?
Yeah, obviously you're not going to win and beat McClintock solely on Democratic votes. So what is your strategy for outreach to disaffected Republicans and the independents here?
I guess I'll
Repeat the question so everybody can hear.
Okay, so the question was essentially, I'll just preface and say getting out the Democratic vote is really important, but we're not going to win with Democrats alone. How are we going to reach out to disaffected Republicans? You said independents also. So that's the question. So I have a few strategies and approaches here. The first is that I really am trying to emphasize the values that we all share. I think that we all share caring about our families, right? Family values as defined that way. I think I said this before, but I'm a mom of 3 kids. I have a lot of relatives here in the district, and those are values that we actually share with a lot of Republicans, and that Tom McClintock doesn't share, right? We can draw such a strong contrast. The man has literally voted against the federally subsidized school lunch program and a couple other childhood nutrition programs. Who wants to take food from children? He voted against the Violence Against Women Act. He votes against basic measures that support families and help families to thrive and prosper in our communities. So that's just one example of a way that I think we can identify some of these values we share, but then show that we can actually offer a better way of putting those values into action. I think also values around freedom and independence. There's a big ethos, at least in my reading, around the idea of wanting the government just to get out of your business, wanting people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And my approach is to say, okay, I admire that. I've had several minimum wage jobs. I understand the value of hard work. I've gotten burned by toaster ovens, trying to make sandwiches and all sorts of things, and cut my hands working in sandwich shops. But, if we want people to be out there doing hard work, we need to give them the tools to do that. So, as I said before, they need to be healthy. They need to have access to health care. You need to have literally the infrastructure you need, such as internet. You need to have good educational opportunities and job training programs. So that's the way I would approach it, is trying to emphasize the shared values and then showing how we can give people tools to actually enact those. And in terms of literal outreach, I think we can also do a lot that we've never done with sort of data and running an intentional campaign here in this district. Because some of these people who are registered as no party preference, a lot of them have lived in the Bay Area before. That gives us some clues about their views or views they've been exposed to. We can tell a lot of things about people from databases that we can have access to, and we can figure out better ways to do outreach to them and actually get them to turn out. So I think that there's quite a lot we can work with. The last thing I'll say is that, people ask me sometimes, okay, so what is McClintock's appeal to people? If you have thoughts, let's talk about it afterward. The one answer I get back sometimes is fiscal conservatism. that he's built a brand as California's fiscal conservative. And people who identify themselves as, oh, being a small business person, that does appeal to some people, right? But my actual take on Tom McClintock is that he is such an extreme fiscal conservative that he's not fiscally responsible. I think what people really mean is that they don't want to see waste in government spending. And so my pitch to them is, hey, it's actually not responsible to vote no on every single federal government program, right? That is not a responsible way to build our economy and to support our community and the values that we actually share. If you run a small business and you starve that business of resources and you don't invest in infrastructure and lights and a building and training your employees, the business is going to fail, right? So I think we can actually even embrace some of this logic that causes people to like the fiscal conservatism of him and show that no, actually he votes for a lot of things that are really wasteful government spending, like Trump's trips to Mar-a-Lago. He's voiced support for in his town halls recently. Allegedly he's in favor of the border wall, which would be a huge waste of money. I can tell you that as a former consular officer. And at the same time, he's not willing to make smart investments that would actually help us here. So there are a couple different lines of attack we can take there.
Yeah, the district breakdown is 130,000 registered Dems, 190,000 registered Republicans, 100,000 non-declared, and somewhere around 100,000 eligible but unregistered. So we need to make sure we get that presidential year turnout for the Democrats. We need to inspire the Democrats to come out. We need to make them feel like there is something happening. We get a very high voter turnout among our seniors. It's our millennial Democrats that we need to get out the door. They voted at close to 54% in the last election. And so millennials come out when they can feel that they are having an impact. And so we need to inspire them to come make an impact in this campaign. We need to be able to sort of bridge the divide and welcome the moderate Republicans or any Republicans. I am very dedicated to having a campaign that never shames someone who may have voted for Trump or even McClintock. That I will point out the distinctions between us, but I will never shame or humiliate or say, how dare you, you short-sighted person, for doing that, because I recognize that they were voting with a belief that they were voting in their best interest, and what my job is to demonstrate to them that their best interest is voting for me. That their best interest is voting for their community. And so we need to be able to have that sort of revelation for our friends who may have voted for Trump and our neighbors, because we know a lot of them, right? And they're lovely people. And it is important that when you approach them, you remember that they are lovely people. And so I am doing a campaign that is breaking out stereotypes. I don't want to look like your standard average Democrat. I don't want them to think that this is business as usual, because this is a new, fresh approach to politics. We are taking the politics out of it and we are putting public service into it. Public service is the priority. So there are a couple things that I'm going to do. One is to have a community service campaign where we are going to go out on our weekends, and I'm excited for you guys to help me plan these. We're going to go out on our weekends, and you guys will help me phone bank during the week, and we're going to call people up and say, hey, come meet Jessica Moore. She's running for Congress. We're going to be doing a cleanup at our local school. We are going to be pulling out star thistles from a local playground. We are going to be helping keep Yosemite cleaner. Whatever the program is, whether we're building a school garden or painting a church, we'll find some type of small labor activity that we can do that serves our community. So that when people think of dirty politics, they think of us just in the garden with our hands in, with our sleeves rolled up, getting to work. And I want to be able to give people a visual of that. And then the worst case scenario, I will win, but what the end result of the campaign is that our community is a little bit brighter, and it's a little bit better. And that is something that everyone from every side of the aisle can get together on, and it will inspire our millennials to come out. And then
Yellow Star Thistle, Matt Lane's house.
yes,
Starting with us.
you're ready.
Paolo, you had a question.
Thank you. I think everybody here is excited to see that we have two wonderful candidates right before us today. We've had good candidates in the past. We have not had the necessary organization, and now I think with the excitement caused by Trump, we will have that organization. We know what the problems are when we read certain books. For instance, Richard Florida's book, describes the segregation in American cities, also rural and urban, and rich and poor, and by race even. Black communities are still disenfranchised and in certain parts of the cities. And yet, the disenfranchised are voting for Trump. And in the beginning of his book, he describes, how's this possible? Brexit and now Trump. How can this happen? How can we reach these people who are voting against their own interests? And from what you've been saying, I know that you are understanding this very well. But do you think, and this is the question, do you think healthcare could be a wedge issue for us, knowing that 70% of the people would want a single-payer healthcare system, which would be the next step after Obamacare? At the local level, at least, this California, it's within our reach. So could healthcare be a wedge issue in our favor versus the invented, well, no, the wedge issues the Republicans ruthlessly and use to tear America apart?
Yeah, I like to point out to groups that when they walk into the grocery store, they don't buy milk, eggs, and cheese and come home and get a bill for $2,000 2 months later and say, gosh darn it, I got out-of-network milk if I had only known. And so when I think that helps put it in perspective that our healthcare system is broken, you know, that it is not following the market norms or the social norms that are set up in our society. And we have excellent models, and I think you're absolutely right that healthcare is something that everyone agrees is a huge burden on our society. I mean, it's a drag on our economy in terms of employers paying for healthcare. It locks people into jobs in a way that limits economic movement. And being able to have job fluidity is really the foundation of a free economy and really heightens any economy. You know, that's what you look for. And so I think absolutely healthcare is going to be a great asset for us, and especially because Tom McClintock was sitting on the House floor. I got in the Auburn Journal for saying this. I pointed out that Tom McClintock, while he was having celebratory beers on the House floor, the rest of us are wondering where our health care is going to come from. You know, he celebrated after voting for the Obamacare repeal, and it was such a vote against the direct interests of our community. And then I also want to get to the first part of your question, which is I'm honored to see that Dr. Gerlett is here today. And he just set such a great model for us of what it means to be a good candidate. And he set an excellent example of running, just putting 100% in and being a model of what our community deserves. And so I'm just grateful for your leadership here. And one of the things that we have a couple things going this year, sort of as a backlash to Trump, that Dr. Gerlett didn't have accessible to him, and that is we have 10 counties organizing an anti-Trump campaign already. They are doing polling so that we can actually answer that exact question. Is healthcare going to be the message that can unite us? They are going to be doing polling across the counties to tell us that. And they are starting an anti-McClintock campaign, is what I meant to say. That they are starting this campaign against McClintock now, early. You know, the structure is in place. They've raised the funds to do it. Dr. Gerlett really supported that effort and made it possible. And so that is giving us all this head start to really launch a campaign that can actually take McClintock out. And then the next step that we can do is this grassroots movement. All of you out here tonight, you know, a year before the primary, are out here supporting this effort and learning and getting excited. And so all of us mobilizing is going to make that impact. So I think we have a real, not just a real chance, I think we have a real opportunity here to win this campaign. And McClintock is not going to see us coming, and that's exciting.
Thank you. So I'd also like to thank Dr. Gerlett for coming, and just to say that I think that even the visual here epitomizes what's different this year. You know, that I'm so grateful that both Dr. Gillette himself, other people who have been involved in Democratic politics here for a long time. I mean, I know Charlie Brown, who never actually ran in this area, but has been sort of talking to all the candidates who are interested in running, as Dr. Gillette has. And so I really appreciate the organization from people like Elaine and the different groups that are all coming together. This is what's going to make it possible. But I wanted to answer your question as well. So my initial read is that yes, healthcare is absolutely something I want to emphasize in my campaign, because there are such tangible, real threats to healthcare in our own district right now. I mean, I was so personally shocked. Well, first of all, people begged and pleaded. I'm sure many of you pleaded with McClintock not to vote for the AHCA to repeal Obamacare, and he did it anyhow. I mean, he just completely callously ignored his own constituents. And the language he uses, he calls pre-existing conditions nuisances. He has said in speeches that are publicly available on his website that people who are overweight should actually be charged more for their health insurance, and if they don't like it, they should stop overeating and go on a diet. That's actually what he said in a public speech that he advertises. Go to his campaign site, click on issues, and the speech is there under healthcare. This is just unconscionable, and the man clearly does not care about the basic well-being of his own constituents. So I think people are starting to realize that, though, now that the AHCA and the repeal of Obamacare is a possibility. I was talking recently to one of the few primary care providers in Mariposa, and she was telling me that for her it's hard because she, like many of us, saw the writing on the wall and saw the real direct harms that would come from repealing Obamacare, but a lot of her patients didn't. And I completely agree with Jessica that, my starting point is that I really respect everyone, and I think I try to be very empathetic and understand what led someone to think something in the past, and how can we try to help them to maybe change their mind now. And so, this physician's assistant was saying that, she's been forced into the position of needing to kind of talk to her patients and help them through this, because now they're starting to realize that they are the very people who might lose their health insurance. And, I think there's a compassionate way we can approach people and say, it is understandable that a lot of people didn't see this coming. But now we realize what the consequences could be, and you need a representative in Congress who's going to stand up for your basic interests. I thought it was so horrible that when McClintock voted for the AHCA, not only did he go and celebrate, he issued a written statement, right, on his website, explaining why he voted for it. And have any of you read the statement? Okay, so it's on the website, and he lists one geographic place in there. He says he voted for the AHCA because Obamacare is, according to him allegedly, failing in Iowa. Iowa, that's it, that's the rationale. He claims this program is not working well in Iowa, so he's going to vote to repeal it. The obvious question being, what about your own district? The Affordable Care Act cut the uninsurance rate in half in our district in just 2 years. And it's had real positive consequences for people even with employer-sponsored health care and Medicare, not to mention the issues with Medi-Cal and Medicaid. The cuts that are proposed now to Medi-Cal would be devastating for rural schools. It would be devastating for many of the healthcare providers in rural areas who struggle to stay open. And so I think that there are ways we can reach out to people, but respectfully. And I really like the idea. We're going to have to experiment a bit and see how people react to things. I like the idea of trying to work through community leaders on particular issue areas in their own communities. If we can get people who are primary care providers in communities to do short little videos for Facebook or even television advertising eventually. If we can get people who are volunteer firefighters who are out there picking people up on medical calls. If we can get those types of people to try to explain in their own terms to their neighbors why they need a different representative in Washington. I think that's a way that we can really use healthcare to our advantage, hopefully, in this campaign.
So Carol, then Dr. Gillette, then Ryan. Carol.
Well, I guess I don't have a question, but I do have an issue with healthcare. Because many of us are green, as we can see in this room, and many of us in this room have Medicare. And no one addresses the issue of Medicare with Obamacare, because Obamacare raised taxes 0.09% to help boost Medicare. If Obamacare is repealed, those taxes will go away, go to the rich, and then Paul Ryan can step in, because Medicare will be very vulnerable, and people in this room will get vouchers which will never keep up with the cost of medical care. Nobody's talking about that. We're going to lose Medicaid, Medi-Cal for all these people, we're also going to lose Medicare. And that's an issue I think that you need to talk to your neighbors about, because we care about that, especially those of us who are older than 65. So I just want to bring that up because I don't hear anybody talking about that.
It's not health care, it's wealth care.
Yeah, so thank you for that comment. That's a terrific point. And so I absolutely agree. I think that looking at both, the new healthcare plan in quotation marks and its economic consequences and the tax cuts hidden in there, I think is really important. But I absolutely agree that it would have really devastating consequences for Medicare. Something else that sometimes people don't realize is that the Affordable Care Act is actually closing the donut hole in Medicare for your prescription drugs. I don't know, have any of you ever fallen into the donut hole before? A little bit.
A senior I advocated for who fell into donut hole. I didn't know anything else.
Yeah, so if you fall in, it's not good.
It's very bad.
It's very bad, right? So the way Medicare Part D was put into place through some weird Byzantine negotiating process, your drugs are covered pretty well up until a certain point, and then it's around $1,000 and something. When you hit that point, or until now, until the Affordable Care Act went into place, there was a period where you'd be accruing more expenses for your drugs and have to pay nearly full price until you hit around over $4,000, and then it would be covered again. And that was why it was called the donut hole, because it's like a donut that the donut's there, you fall into the hole. And this has dire consequences. I mean, we're talking about people on fixed incomes, $4,000 or potentially $8,000 for two people in a couple if they both fell in. This could be financially devastating. And it was bad public policy to start with. And the Affordable Care Act is addressing it currently. So by 2020, they're closing it gradually, more and more every year. And by 2020, the donut hole will not exist, assuming that the Affordable Care Act stays in place as planned. So yeah, I really agree, and thank you for the suggestion.
I just have one more issue because I listened to TV this afternoon and there's a late Kaiser study that says Obamacare is not spiraling downward. It is not. Maybe there's a problem in Iowa, but they're all white and farmers, so who knows?
Yeah, thank you. And the reference to Kaiser, so the Kaiser Family Foundation is a great source of reporting. I mean, McClintock also likes to talk about high-risk pools, and they have a really good report that highlights the problems with those. So, I can leave it at that, but I just really agree with you. And McClintock in the past, in his Tea Party days, some of the things he said about Medicare. I mean, we have a very strong argument to make that he is a threat and a danger to our seniors in this district.
Dr. Gillette?
Well, actually, we should let Jessica.
Oh, she said no.
You heard my sense on here's my 3-second healthcare answer, because I think Regina's covered it pretty well. But I would like us to see universal healthcare in place to relieve the pressures on our society that medical debt and fear of not, I think that would get us into a spot where we're really focused on prevention and have a culture of healthcare prevention. And then I think to be able to get to that point, we need to have some healthcare transparency laws that help us see at a universal cross. We have anecdotes and understand what is driving up prices, but to be able to get our Republican friends on board, we need to be able to demonstrate that what is driving up healthcare costs, whether it's pharmaceutical costs or people going into hospitals without insurance, causing that cost to be transferred throughout the rest of the hospital system and driving prices up, or pharmaceutical companies having a monopoly, or perhaps it's reflective of their actual R&D. But we need to know either way what the actual cost of healthcare is, and then it will be much easier for us to pay for it. And there's some estimates out there that it's likely that what we're already paying to cover Medicare and Medicaid at the federal level will likely be about the price of covering the universal healthcare at a more reasonable cost level.
Healthcare question from the doctor, probably?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the candidates for stepping up. This is an important race. And I thank all of you for supporting me. I want to ask you to open up your wallets again, because it takes a lot of money to run a campaign, more than you can ever imagine. And these candidates will need your funding, and that's the way to beat Tom McClintock. We had 5,000 road signs. We needed 50,000 road signs. We had several hundred TV advertising spots. We need several thousand. We can do it. with your money and money from every county. Tom McClintock is just evil. He wants to take your health care away, as you heard. He wants to pollute the environment so your kids cannot do well in school, so you'll get Alzheimer's early because of polluted environment, water, and air. And he wants Wells Fargo to be able to cheat you again. This guy has to go. So congratulations, get out here more and more. And by the way, do we have a reporter here from the Union Democrat?
Emails were sent, phone calls were sent.
So this is amazing. We need to have the local papers, whether we're in Calaveras, Mariposa, up in Placerville, they need to be here at these forums. And all of you, write letters, everybody tomorrow. I'm going to call and say, why wasn't somebody here? If we start now, as we progress onward, the reporters will be here taking your photograph, and it'll be on the front page of tomorrow's paper.
Thank you for that.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, I would just 2 points to follow up on that. Yes, please contribute, because have you guys heard of Emily's List? It's a group that provides money for women candidates. Emily stands for Early Money is Like Yeast. So it is critical that we get the momentum now. I have campaign contribution forms in the back with Susie if you want to pass some of those out. And I also have an email list that you can sign up for to get my newsletters so that you can donate as often as you'd like. And also, yeah, the point to getting our names out in the press, earned media is going to be critical. And I was really excited that I was in this last weekend, I was in the San Francisco Chronicle and in the Washington Post. So we're already getting some national attention on this.
One of the other things that we have started, that we're in the process of setting up, is a candidate support system. Terry Olson in the front was a preschool teacher, and we wanted Terry to run for school board. And Terry said she would not make a great school board candidate, but that she would be happy to babysit someone's children so they could be a school board candidate. So one of the things that we're going to be setting up in the club, in the county, and in the district, and eventually stretching the entire length of the district, is a candidate support system. So for example, I drove Jessica today. Barbara Farkas drove Gina. Terry's going to host them for the evening. Richard Morrison, his wife, hosted Gina and Whitney last night. Any way that we can help them, it doesn't cost us $100 to host them for the night, but it saves them $100, which they can directly put towards McClintock. So please be thinking of some out of the box thinking of ways that you could help get the information out. Debbie Perez, we could put signs on our kayaks. Anyway, any way that we could possibly get support for the candidates is awesome. Ryan Campbell has a question. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so just very quickly, I wanted to explain also how to donate to our campaign. And I sort of said this earlier, but we're using 3 types of fundraising at this point. So small online donations. Most of you hopefully have business cards. There's some in the back. Or Whitney can give you more information. He's over here in the green shirt. I feel like I'm on, selling things on television. Sorry about that, but it is kind of what we're doing right now. So through my website, which is batesonforcongress.com, it's very easy. We're in Act Blue, and you can donate online if you'd like to. It really does matter because, Jessica may have been hinting at this, but outside groups like Emily's List, who I've also talked to quite a bit, eventually the DCCC, even large conservation groups, for them to get involved here, especially in a district where there's a history of the incumbent winning by large margins, we first have to show that we have a viable candidate. And unfortunately, I go around and try to tell people, there are these large crowds showing up. People here are motivated. And the question is, have you raised $100,000? Have you raised $300,000? Because that's what they want to see. And so, our campaign is close, actually, to hitting some of those milestones where we'll be able to bring in outside support. But in the beginning, the media is not coming. We sent press releases also to the Union Democrat, and we're just, kicking and clawing with them. And I think that we need self-help. This is something that we have to start ourselves, and then the world will see what we're doing and will come and help us. So the other type of fundraising that we're doing, I'll just say quickly, is house parties. And this is fun, it's easy, it's a good way to socialize and build the network, and ask for modest contributions. And so you can also sign up on our email list there, and there's a little area to check if you'd like to host a house party or if you'd like to volunteer. We have so many skilled and wonderful people, and volunteering is not just knocking on doors later next year. It's graphic design, it's video editing, it's all sorts of things. And I'll echoing what Elaine was sort of hinting at earlier, I also just really want to encourage more people to run in any upcoming election. I mean, there's assembly, there's all sorts of things, coming up, and we need to have more good candidates, because I think you can already see this at the level of the congressional race, that the more people there are out there, stirring up interest and bringing people out to events like this, the better it is for all of us. Because we all reach people in a slightly different way, and so I think it's great that there's this groundswell, but we need even more candidates competing at even more levels.
Perfect. Okay, right.
Yeah, thank you very much. Like others have said, thank you very much for coming here and talking about many local issues that are important to our local area. We talked about infrastructure and healthcare, but there's one question that I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up. Where do you stand on impeachment, and what do you plan to do about it if you're elected?
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, so the question is, what about impeachment, and what are you going to do about it if you're elected? So I'll start by saying that I'm a strong voice for accountability, and I have the courage and the integrity to do what we need to do. I really want to see and will advocate for a bipartisan commission modeled after the 9/11 Commission to thoroughly look into Trump and Russia and related connections. I mean, even just today, more and more keeps coming out just from the media. That is the tip of the iceberg. And I can't tell you what information will be contained in there, but it is really important that we get it in a way that's trustworthy. When I joined the State Department, they were using the 9/11 Commission report as training material, right? That we actually have a great report that came out of the 9/11 Commission, and the terrorist travel supplement dug through in meticulous detail. How did the hijackers give visas? It reproduces their visa applications. And that is something that our entire government, in a bipartisan way, has been able to take and use to train people, and constructively move forward. I think that is absolutely what we need to do as regards the Trump-Russia investigation. And Tom McClintock, again, he's one of these people who runs around saying we should investigate Susan Rice rather than Trump. Rather than Russia. This is crazy. So I really absolutely see the need for an investigation. Of course, it would depend what information comes out, and I really I try not to prejudge anything. But if it comes to it, and if there are impeachable offenses there, then yes, I would vote for impeachment.
Our Constitution leaves impeachment essentially up to the House of Representatives. It's very sort of broadly written, and so it's essentially their judgment call. And if they want to bring impeachment charges. So until we get Democrats into the House of Representatives, it's not even going to be an issue on the table. I would love to get in there and pass a law that says retroactively Trump has to release his tax returns, and have us take a look at those. There might be some information in there that might be relevant. But yes, I am going to get in there. I'm going to defend our Constitution, and I will resist the policies that Trump is laying out. Because having had my experience in national security strategy, I can say with complete certainty that this is a man who is incredibly dangerous for our national security and needs to be held in check. That we also need our Congress to be holding our foreign policy in check. And it is essential that we take a stance for a man who has been unwilling to staff the senior levels of the State Department, has been draining. There were about 120 national security experts from both sides of the aisle who signed a Never Trump letter. Those were the people that should have come in and brought their wealth of experience to be our top negotiators and to be guiding Trump on foreign signaling even. And this is a man who signals to North Korea that we have ships charging at you, an armada coming to get you, when it was going the other direction. But you know what that tells North Korea? That it puts them on the defensive. Just with that signaling, they could have wiped out Seoul in 10 minutes and we would have had nothing to do to stop it. International signaling is critical, and Trump is a loose canon when it comes to this. And it is important that we get voices in Congress that don't sort of step back and say, oh, well, maybe there's another explanation, or he didn't really mean that, or he just says what he thinks, and it's fine. It's not okay. It is not okay for someone with the weight of the Constitution and the title of President of the United States and our Commander-in-Chief to be a live wire, to be unaccountable for his words and action, and to be unstrategic about what he is saying and thinking. It is unacceptable for our leader to walk into a room with Russian counterparts and give them Israeli intelligence that was given to us in confidence, and burn a source, and burn that source of intelligence, and burn that intelligence relationship as we go forward. That is blinding the US, and that is dangerous. So, yes, to answer your question, I will follow the Constitution, and I will look at this man under a microscope, and I will hold him accountable with every fiber of my being and every ferocity that I have.
Still take a question?
Yeah.
So thank you for both coming out. Appreciate it. I'm excited about both of you.
They'll repeat.
So, Jessica, you were talking about Iraq, and this is like the worst foreign policy blunder in modern American history. It turned out that the report that they had sold yellow cake uranium was a forgery, and you had to talk about the insurgency like it was something that just popped up out of nowhere. The fact is, it was created when Bush gave a directive to defund the Iraqi army, creating a force of thousands of angry, hungry Iraqis. And so even Trump has now says he didn't support that decision, even though he's lying. We all know that. But how can we know that next time the intelligence community says that there was a terrorist attack and it actually is just a false flag as an excuse to go to war? How do you know that? How are you going to know that it's just not just a false flag? And make that decision?
Yeah, no, I mean, he's really questioning, asking, based on Iraq and how misleading, the intelligence was, and how manipulated that was, that how do we trust our intelligence community, and how do we trust our leadership? And I think that's a really critical question, and I'm debating which way to go. Do I go Iraq lessons learned or today? And I think, in terms of, let me give you a couple Iraq lessons learned, because I just want to make something clear that I didn't support us going into Iraq. And I went because I was asked, because my country asked me to go. And there were three sort of blunders, and part of the lessons I learned from Iraq is that we had this insular group of leadership at the top that had an agenda. They had their own agenda, and they ignored the rest of the foreign policy community and the experts on the ground. So when we got out on the ground out there, we had Ambassador Paul Bremer, who was advocating who didn't stop the looting. And that meant that Iraq was just gutted. Anything that wasn't nailed down walked out the door. He advocated for a de-Baathification policy, which is what I was actually working to fix, because every Iraqi who had been a member of the Ba'ath Party, which was pretty much anybody if they were in the government, that was your precondition on getting in, that meant they were out. So any secretary, any power plant operator, any school teacher, they had to flee the country. And so Iraq lost all of its institutional knowledge overnight. So anyone who knew how to run the government, how to run a power plant, how to run a water sanitation plant was out. And that is really hard to try to then win over hearts and minds and demonstrate to a community, no, we're really here to help, when they can't flush their toilets. They can't get power on when it's 130 degrees outside. I know, I've been in 130 degrees without air conditioning, and it is really hellish, but it's a dry hell. And And then they disbanded the Iraqi army, which was one of the what led directly to the formation of the militias, where the Iraqi army should have gone into. We were all screaming at the top of our lungs, we need a disarmament, demobilization, reintegration program, which is basically saying take their guns, put them to work, give them some training, and to get those guys engaged in the next level of the economy. So I think the lesson we have to learn, there are, there's particularly with the intelligence community, there's a tendency to not trust them because there's no transparency, right? The nature of intelligence work is a lack of transparency. And the only times we get transparency on intelligence is when there has been a massive failure and it gets cracked open for everyone to see and shine the light on it. But there's lots of intelligence and lots of hard-working people who are devoted patriotic Americans working inside of all levels of our national security apparatus. And they want what's best for our country. They have served out in the field. And so I think it's important not to villainize the foot soldiers, the folks who are working on the ground, who are working to support our country. The danger, and I am afraid that we are in a situation that led us into Iraq again, is where you have isolated leadership who is not listening to the real experts on the ground. And we are seeing that. That is why it is so dangerous that there's no leadership at the State Department, that the top levels of the policy office at the Defense Department are not well staffed. And so it is critical that we look to see that there's collaboration and communication happening between the political leadership in our country and the institutional experts who are out on the ground all the time. And so you can trust your intelligence community when you see that communication happening up and down the chain. And if we don't see that communication happening up and down the chain, like we see right now, we're in trouble and we should be incredibly skeptical.
Thank you. So I really appreciate the question about Iraq, because I've actually been thinking about the invasion of Iraq quite a bit lately. That was the last time that I really felt passionately that I had a moral obligation to stand up and do everything I could to stop something terrible that was happening, that was going to cost lives, that was a terrible policy decision. And I really, as you can probably tell, felt passionate about this. And so I did everything I could. And I was quite involved in demonstrating against the start of the Iraq War, because I felt that at the time I was a college student and I didn't have some of the tools and connections and skills and degrees and professional experience that I have now. I mean, I was just myself, just like anybody here. And so I made my signs. My particular sign that I liked the best and often used said, "I'm here because I care deeply about America." I tried to make it very clear why I was protesting. But absolutely, the day the Iraq War started, I was protesting, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. I just felt absolutely crystal clear that when people look back on that moment in history, that was the only place I wanted to be that day. And after the 2016 election, I started to feel the same way again, except even much worse. I felt that it was much more urgent. And to me, the stakes are higher now. I mean, I've essentially torpedoed a very promising academic career where I had won national awards and very well could have gotten tenure at a place like MIT. I have 3 young kids that I wish I could be spending more time with right now at this very moment. But this is really important. And I think that, in times like this, ordinary people do have the ability to make a difference. I'm a pragmatist, I'm also very idealistic, as maybe you can tell. I worked at the Martin Luther King Jr. Papers Project for years and years when I was in college, and I really believe in the value of direct action and grassroots activism like we're seeing now. So I just decided again that this is a time when I have an obligation to stand up and do everything I can. And maybe we don't succeed, as with the Iraq War, but I feel like at least then there's a historical record, and we can all tell ourselves, that we did our part. So thank you very much for your question.
Megan, did you want to ask a question about alternative energy?
I'm all for it.
What Matt is trying to say is, in our household, we're firm believers in solar energy and renewable energy, and I would like to hear your positions on it. Thank you. Good question, Matt.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of renewables. I think it's definitely the future. It's where we need to go. I mean, this concept that we keep investing in fossil fuels, which are running out, I don't know if anyone's noticed, that we need to be investing down the line. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities for bringing for expanding that argument so that it's embraced by by conservatives as well, because not only are we seeing it as a great opportunity for job growth here. I mean, we just saw Lake Tahoe go 100% renewable on their energy grid, and I think it's a great model that we can emulate throughout our community. There's some opportunities for biomass. I know Sonora is actually talking about getting a biomass plant in to take some of the trees out here and put them to work in energy, and then take the charcoal and put that into water treatment. And so there's a lot of energy behind that here. Renewable energy is really something that's dear to my heart, because when I was at the Defense Department, I was the strategic advisor to the four-star commander on the U.S.-India defense relationship, and I was tasked to restarting it. And I found that I was able to use renewable energies. I was able to take an invasive species that was a plant in India that was devastating a community that needed jobs and energy, and I was able to find the technology to turn that into renewable energy, and we used that as a carrot to get India to come to the negotiating table. We said, hey, we understand you have this problem in your community. Why don't you come to the table? We'll take care of it for you. And don't worry, it was an incredibly labor-intensive technology, so it wasn't viable in the U.S. I didn't take away U.S. jobs. Don't freak out. But it was being able to sort of look at the resources at hand and make those connections that helped me see that renewable energy has huge potential in our community and could be a really revitalizing and sustainable source of income and health in our society here.
Right. So I'll just say very quickly that I completely agree. I'm a huge supporter of renewable energy and research into renewable energy. I mean, again, having an academic background, having had my National Science Foundation Fellowship attacked by Tom McClintock personally, I understand that we need to both be helping people implement the technologies we have now and investing in the research to give us even better technologies that are even cleaner and greener and make even more sense for the economy going forward. And like I said earlier, that's something where people here already agree. And I find it so heartening driving around. You all, maybe some of these are your pastures and things, but you'll be driving along and there's a barn. And there are solar panels on top of the barn. There's a field, and there's somebody's using a bit of their land that is on a slope or isn't usable for other things, and they've got their solar panels out there. I mean, even our ranchers. This just makes economic sense. And so I absolutely support, I think this is an area where we can draw a real contrast with McClintock. This is something we're already supporting, already doing. Why should we have someone in Congress who wants to cut funding for these programs? It makes so much sense. I think that the idea of biomass is incredibly interesting, and it's great that there's some projects that might go forward. I think it has a lot of potential for this area. And yeah, again, I think this is not sort of the opposite of a wedge issue, right? This is something where we can really draw people together, but draw such a strong contrast with Tom McClintock. It could be great for our region.
We'll take one or two more questions, and then the ladies can chat individually with people. Yes?
My question is really straightforward. I think that, as someone pointed out, you have a lot of gray hair here, that you really need the millennials. We need them to step up and work for this government. I don't know if it's because they're just young or involved in their real lives, but they need to come out. How are you going to get them?
As a mom of millennials, my daughter's 23, living in Santa Cruz. She's working 3 part-time jobs. And she called us for our opinions on voting, and we kind of talked her through it. She was busy. She showed up and she voted, but she's busy. And I'm not saying that's the case with everyone, but I think one of the things that we, with gray hair without Ms. Clairol, we need to educate them as to what the resources are in our community. We were talking about that at the Democratic Women's Coalition meeting yesterday. We need to educate them on why they need to vote for one of these people instead of Tom McClintock, what they can do that he's not doing for us. We need to do voter registration. We need to be, one of the things that the Democratic Club wants to do is to be at Columbia College at least 1 or 2 days a month registering voters and talking to them about why they need to register to vote. How many of you know that you can now pre-register when you're 16? So how sweet is that? Let's get them when they're 16. There are actually 2 weeks set aside during the year when we can go to high school campuses and start talking to people. We will then have their name, their address, we'll know when they're gonna vote, and we can start contacting them and saying, hey, do you have any questions about the campaign? Hey, we're having a meeting where people are coming tonight. So we need to reach them. We can't just assume that they're not interested. Perhaps we just haven't given them the right candidates yet.
Well, thank you for that, Elaine. I completely agree. So I'll say to start with, we're both really old millennials. We're kind of fake millennials on the borderline. But we have a lot of young people, I'll just say, already involved in my own campaign. We have Whitney back there, who's also a millennial, and a number of even younger volunteers. I did one house party with high school students, which was great. And just today over at Columbia College, we kind of spontaneously ended up having lunch with a whole bunch of them. And I mean, having taught in university settings for a number of years at this point, I love young people. I mean, I think they're the lifeblood, and I just love sitting down and having a discussion with them. And again, really taking everyone seriously. I mean, we learned some really substantive, important things about their needs, but also about the community more broadly here through these young men that we had lunch with today. And so that's not really a strategy, it's more a matter of approach. I think that, you know, both of us, by being younger and by using social media in new and innovative ways, posting, you know, short videos, different interactive things that people can do online, there's some hope there, right? There is some hope of engaging people that way. I completely agree with the idea of voter registration in high schools and, you know, voter registration more generally. Some people, you know, kind of throw up their hands and feel like there's nothing for them tangible to do tangibly or concretely yet. Voter registration, this is huge. And a lot of younger people, you know, we don't really have much in the way of four-year universities in this district. And so a lot of younger people leave to go to college. We need to get them. We need to make sure they're registered here, that they're going to get their absentee ballot. They're going to vote here in June. They're going to vote here in November. Their votes really matter. Younger people often have multiple jobs or sort of changing locations a lot. People in Tahoe and Truckee already told me this is a problem. A lot of the younger people there will move addresses frequently. And so we need to help them make sure they know where they're registered and that they actually show up to vote or get their mail-in ballot ahead of time. These things are really, really important. And finally, on the policy stuff, you know, environmental policy, younger people typically feel much differently than older people. Maybe because it's our generation and even our little kids' generations who are going to have to deal with the fallout from global warming and the drastic changes to this region that could result if it's left unchecked. You know, on the health care stuff, the Affordable Care Act is letting people up to age 26 stay on their parents' insurance if they're lucky enough to have that as a possibility. That is huge. You know, a lot of people in our generation want the flexibility to be freelancers or to go off and be writers by themselves, you know, without a structured job for a period of time, things like that. There's at least an option out there now where they can buy health insurance. I mean, I remember finishing college and having, you know, briefly working for, having a fellowship to work for a nonprofit for a few months before starting the Foreign Service and going through this angst about how do you cobble together health insurance for 3 months, health insurance for 4 months. You know, it is really a huge benefit to younger people that in many cases they can stay on their parents' insurance until 26 now. So I think we need to reach them on sort of an inspirational level, a social media level, through registration and on these policy issues that really do matter to them.
Reaching millennials is critical. I mean, it helps that Gina and I both speak at millennial pace. So sorry for those of you who aren't millennials. But you know, millennials like to feel inspired. And they like to feel like they're contributing. You know, sometimes you say, oh, millennials, they're lazy or they don't like to get involved. It's because they're discouraged. That's why they don't get involved, because they don't see the impact they can make. That's why I was talking about having a community service campaign to get them out. They're not going to be as excited about doing a phone bank, but they will come out and plant a garden. You know, they will come out and clean up the lake. We're doing a camping campaign in Tahoe in the fall where we're going to go camp up at Tahoe and we're going to register voters and I'm going to teach everyone the best s'more and take them on hikes, and we're going to do a lake cleanup in Tahoe. And so, you know, these are... I need to be able to bring in the millennials. We need to demonstrate to them this isn't politics as usual. And one of the fun things I did just last weekend at the 4th of July, on the 4th of July parades, one of the clubs asked me to bring a convertible. And I said, don't have a convertible. I don't know if y'all know, but I quit my job to run for Congress. And so I took my dad's. He has this little amphibious hunting vehicle. It looks like a small tank. And so we decked that out with an American flag and posters and giant Morse for Congress signs and balloons, and put some decoys with blue and red ribbon on them, and brought the dogs and the cousins and babies, and everyone was handing out flyers. And we were going down the parade in this very red part of our district, and I was saying, "Who loves America?" And everyone was cheering and excited, and I had so many kids running up to me, being like, "I want to do this too," and I want to, and I was just, it was so fun, you know, it was so fun just to go out and be patriotic with everyone, and that's what, and millennials love that. I got so much feedback, and so many of my volunteers are now teenagers, surprisingly enough, who are inspired and excited. I've been getting parents coming up to me and saying, "My kids didn't want to have anything to do with politics, and then I dragged them to hear you speak, and she said they are tingling." I was like, okay. But I was excited to see that we are inspiring kids, because I can demonstrate, and millennials, all the way up to my age of millennials, who are ready to serve, ready to have an impact in their community. And this is a campaign that demonstrates to them that here's a way you can do it through politics, and it looks familiar to you. It is service, and it is fun, and it's rock climbing, and it's cheering, and they are going to love that, and they're coming out in droves.
Well, that sounds like a very positive place to end it. Thank you so much.